Okay. I'll give this one more go. No, this is not working. Are we live? I guess we'll see in a minute. All right, I'm going to try this again. Ah, it's live. Okay. It appears to be working now. I don't know what's been happening. I could not connect, and I apologize for whatever was going on there. It looks like we're live now, though. So, I'm going to say something here. Hello. Is anybody there? I don't know if this is going out live or not. I guess we will find out. Looks like it is, and yet I can't really tell. Okay, I'm hearing myself. All right, it looks like it's there. All right, my friends, sorry for that weird delay. I don't know what was going on there, but in any case, my name is Jason Levine. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're there, I don't see, it doesn't show me that any people are in this room. If anyone is here, could you say something in the chat? My stats here are showing nothing, but I see that it's live on the page. So, so give me a shout. Let me know before I throw my streaming computer out the window. All right. Well, I'm going to go for a few minutes, and if I don't see any interactions here, I'm going to assume this isn't working, and then I'm just going to call it a day. So here's what I'm going to talk to you about now. We are going to start with mixing some background vocals. Yes, AO Extremo, hello. All right. There is life. Thank you. Sorry again for all the mistweeted tweets. Yeah, it just kind of kept failing on me. Joaquin, what's up? Hey, what's up, Des? Hey, hey. Okay. So it's so late. I've been messing about with this for over 45 minutes trying to get this stream running, but I just wouldn't give up. So I'm kind of not exactly in the mixing zone now, but that's fine. I'll get back into the zone. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start by talking about how to mix beautiful sounding, lush, rich background vocals sourced from some background vocals that I just laid down the day before yesterday. Yes, chat just started working, Bake Like a Pro. Okay, what's up, Ihajo? What's up, David? Thanks for attending, Madi. All right. Oh, from Tunisia. Nice to see you. Again, my apologies for the weird delays. So let me go ahead and click over to my screen, assuming all the rest of this is now working. And a few days ago, I always record all of my piano rehearsals every day. And I laid down a track a couple weeks ago, and I loved it so much that it's a song that I plan on recording on a future album of mine. But I just thought, and it was just recorded with the iPhone, but I thought, oh, it sounded so good. Maybe I'll just overdub some backgrounds just to give an idea what it will sound like, kind of in its finished version. So if you take a look here, what's interesting first is that you'll see that, and I talk about this all the time, but so these are live, one take, raw, untouched background vocals. This is pretty much how I make all music. It's always a live performance. It's generally in one take, and sometimes another for safety. But again, I was just harmonizing with myself in 4 parts, and you can see literally this is like, 1, 2, 3. I think I had to stop because I coughed. 4 and 5, and they're all continuous. There's no editing, comping, fixing. There's probably some bad notes in there. In fact, I know there are. Kind of the nature of mixing background vocals, first and foremost for me, is because I don't use any auto-tune, and I rely on just actually harmonizing voices together. you know, sometimes those little imperfections actually really work very nicely. And as you're singing and sort of monitoring yourself singing against a background voice, you know, if you can tune into that, it creates a very nice, sometimes sympathetic resonance, even when things aren't perfect. Having said that, you can leverage things like reverb and delay to, again, mask some of that. Someone would say, well, if you're going to mask it, why not auto-tune it anyway? Yes, you could. I just don't like the sound of auto-tune, and for me, it's about performance. That's why I do it. If I wanted to just fix it and not sound like myself, then I wouldn't bother. That's my personal preference. So let me let you take a look, listen here. And by the way, you can see, so if I just, oh, look at this great still frame. Man, it's just impossible to get a good still frame. You can see that there's actually video tied to this, but we're not gonna watch the video, and I actually have that silent. So you're only gonna hear the background vocals. And when they're first laid down, I've got some of the volumes attenuated here. You can see -6, -6, -9, -6. So 1 and 2 are kind of mid-range high background vocals. Number 3 is a super high one, which is why I've dropped it down a little bit more. And number 4 is a bass vocal. So let's go ahead and first take a quick listen to this and see what it sounds like. And I don't know how much time I'm going to be able to have here to go through everything, but we'll definitely be able to show you a good before and after. So let's go ahead and take a quick listen. And in fact, well, I'll just play it now, and when we start mixing it, I'll put my headphones on. So here it is, dry, in mono. Also, just want to point that out. I always listen to backgrounds when I'm recording and monitoring them. I listen in mono. Just a tip, if you're recording yourself, overdubbing, monitoring in mono, especially for backgrounds where you're harmonizing, is really an ideal way to do it, because that way, 1, you've got sound in left and right the same. 2, because you're hearing yourself so present and kind of in the center, in the middle, it's easier to find and to slip into a note if you feel like you're going in and out of pitch a little bit. And then I just kind of use the mono playback to see how I have to adjust levels and balances. So first, let's take a listen to this dry, absolutely imperfect, one-take series of background vocals. Here we go. Okay. All right. What's up, Pain Tab? CT, how are you? From DC Metro. I had some turkey. Nice to see you. Okay. So that kind of gives you an idea of what they all sound like together. Now, again, there's no compression or anything on here. There's no limiting. So let me just, I'm going to go through these individually so you can kind of hear what all these parts are in their raw native form. Put these on so I can hear. And this will really kind of give you a good idea of what each of these sounds like individually. Okay, so here was the first one that was laid down. You can hear it's very breathy, of singing it that way on purpose. Now, here's the second part. All right, and so on and so forth. In the third part, this is the higher one. Right? You can hear I'm kind of leaning into that a bit, and here's the bass vocal. And by the way, all of these were recorded right here on this mic, sitting right here. I wasn't even standing. That's how rogue I get when I just try and lay down this stuff, because it's in my head and I just want to put it down. So again, all together in mono, not balanced, here's what those sound like, again, just for a quick bar or two. Here we go. Okay. So you can hear, again, using that natural blend, things start to come together. But there's ways that you can make that sound even better. And like I said, it's a lot of those imperfections that actually make the background voices, especially when there's a lead vocal on top of it, gel even more nicely together. When things are, you know, tuned, yeah, it's fine, but it's not as pleasing to my ear. All right? That's right, all kinds of head voice going on there. And that's the thing is I was right here, like and I'm sort of doing it. People were sleeping. I was just so. Oh, one Alan, thank you very much. So it's always interesting, depending upon your environment, how you sing in that moment. But these, again, they're kind of quiet and breathy, and I knew it was just going to kind of work. All right, so let's begin the process. Now, here's the thing: because of time and other reasons, I'm not going to bother EQing here. I don't even think we need any EQ. They all have a very similar kind of sound. Obviously, this is a really beautiful mic. I'm not worried about EQing them right now. Typically, yes, I would EQ all the background vocals, but more about just treating them. We've got some dynamic issues. I'm not going to worry about that now either, but more it's about taking that very closed mono sound and widening it and broadening that sound to just make it be very big and very lush and very just in tune. All right. So the first thing that I'll then start to do is kind of split things apart and balance them around. And then I'll also generally, almost every time, create specific buses that I'm going to use for the types of effects that I would often apply to background vocals. First and foremost, I always have a reverb bus. This allows me to send any amount of decibels of those tracks to a specific bus that just has reverb. You can use your own choice of your favorite effects. I sometimes use the native Audition ones, which you can find under the reverb menu here. I'm a huge fan of the studio reverb. It's actually just a classic. It's very good in real time. It sounds great. In fact, reverb and full reverb, theoretically, these are actually even listening to them, they're almost a little bit richer. They're just not as performant in real time, and I almost never use them. So if anything, I go to studio reverb. Outside of that, though, my general favorite go-to is this one up here, which I've shown on stream many times, which is the Abbey Road plates. So this is from Waves, and this is another Waves plugin called H Reverb, which it has a lot of different types of sounds. So I'm going to start by adding that Abbey Road plate to this bus. By the way, how did I create that bus? Well, you can do it in a number of different locations. You can do it directly here inside of the track editor simply by right-clicking or control-clicking and new track, stereo bus track. You can also do it from within the mixer. So because I'm going to use sends, in other words, I'm sending the audio from that track to that bus, which is being then filtered into this plate reverb. From here, you can also choose Add Bus, Mono, or Stereo. And you can see I've already built one called Verb, and I built another one called Tape. Now, the reason for the tape one down here, again, now there's lots of different methods for mixing background vocals. In fact, I've got some tutorials on my YouTube channel where I cover some of this. Faster, more rock-style backgrounds I would treat differently. Tape refers to actually tape delay, using different types of delays to offset and or repeat and or naturally chorus a vocal, which again just gives those little pitch moments that are just not super perfect. It just makes them really pleasant to the ear because you get this natural kind of wave kind of sound. You can actually feel almost like a comb filtered kind of sound, and it just works. And this is used ubiquitously in background vocal mixing. So I always have a separate delay tape bus and a separate reverb bus. Sometimes I'll add a tape or delay effect after a reverb as well, or even before. It just depends on how I'm mixing. Today I'm going to keep the two completely separate. So we set up the two buses. I've got reverb on bus 1. And then, by the way, a lot of people don't even realize this. Inside your track sends, which, by the way, this is this twirl down, twirl up section up here. You've got 16 sends here. So you can see I can scroll through them. So bus 1, send 1 is going to be reverb, and then send 2 is going to tape. And I believe I set that up while I was cursing at my streaming system here for you already. So yeah, so we've got everything on sends. Now you may have noticed that there's this button color is changing as I'm flipping through the sends. That's because there's two things going on here. This is what we refer to as our pre and post fader send. What does this do? What does it mean? So when you send a signal pre-fader, and in this case I'm sending the signal of my vocals to that reverb bus before the fader, what that means is that you then have complete independent control over the dry signal. The original dry signal of that background vocal lives on this fader, And the reverberated signal exists only on this reverb bus. So even if you pull that background vocal all the way down, this is just the dry signal when it's pre-fader. All the wet signal remains here, and how much goes there is determined by what you set this knob to, this toggle to right here. Okay, so this is your level for sending to that bus. So pre-fader means that it's a visual indicator here, right? It's being sent to the reverb before the fader, which is why you still have independent control. Now, if you do post-fader, what that means is that it's sent to that reverb bus after the fader. So if I were to drop this fader down, you don't hear the direct signal, and you don't have any signal at the bus either, right? There's some cases where you want to use post-fader control. Sometimes it just depends on what the effect is. Today, I'm using a mix of pre and post. Pre-fader for reverb, post-fader for the tape delay, because I want, when I bring up that dry signal, I want it to actively kind of also control how much of that tape delayed, otherwise unprocessed signal is reflected as well. You still have independent send level control and pan as well, which is also key, and I'll show you that in a second. It just depends on how you're doing it and what you want to do. All right, so we're going to do this pre-fader for all of the reverbs here. Let's put this back at around -6. And the first thing I'm going to do is just start to balance out the dry vocals in kind of a slightly more stereo kind of way. So first of all, I'm going to bring these things down just a little bit more as well, around -13. And then I will typically start panning. Now, because 1 and 2 are like a third or a fifth apart, I usually take the vocals that are a third or fifth apart and kind of spread them like this, all right? Usually around, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, something like that. So we'll pan this first one here, maybe 40% left, and this one 40% right or so. Now, background vocal 3 is that really high, breathy head voice vocal. That one carries a lot of tonality. It also gets a bit louder in places. Now, the volume we can adjust, obviously, with compression. We won't do that today. But in terms of panning and position, because that one is kind of almost like it's like a binding glue for everything, I tend to keep really high ones in the center. It's a personal choice. You can do it any way you want. But again, you've got these others that are kind of harmonizing. This one is kind of a very high-pitched glue. So we're going to keep that just slightly off center, maybe like 4% left. And similarly, the bass vocal, it kind of follows the same concept as when you're mixing bass or bass guitar. It's not uncommon in the 60s, 70s, and 80s to have bass sort of panned, sometimes extreme left or right. To be honest, I even still often in my non-blues, now I just did this blues record where it's me and an acoustic guitarist, and he's on the left and I'm on the right. Yes, because it's just the two of us and I was recreating how it sounded in the room. Generally, for almost all the tracks you hear today, everything modern, bass is always in the center, right? Makes sense. You want the doo and those things to be focused and to be in both speakers, also kicking that subwoofer if that's the kind of music you're mixing. So the bass vocal, again, I'll generally keep just into the center or just left or right of center. So we're just going to offset that, a couple percentage, a few percent here, so like 3.5% right. All right. Again, I've adjusted the volumes here. Let's go ahead and just take this back for a second. And just by making those simple pan changes, take a quick listen already. Okay. Already it starts to open up a bit, and somehow, even though it's not centered like this where it really is glued together, it still sounds okay, but it sounds like, again, it's not quite balanced enough. So we need to start doing a little bit of processing and affecting here. So here's where I will typically start first with something like a tape delay. Now, I will show you that we do have two of my favorite delays, actually of all time, are native audition effects. The analog delay, which has 3 different options here: tape, tube, and classic analog. I love this effect. I use it on, so many productions, probably at least once in every mix of something that I do. It has some pretty good presets. It just sounds very analog and very nice. Also looks like we redid the UI on this in the latest update. There used to be indicators on here. When did we change that? Why did we change that? That's weird. I guess I haven't opened it up since 2 or 3 weeks ago when we updated Audition. So I love this one. I'm not going to use it here, though. The other one that I really like, which is just a classic, what you would really basically call just a slapback. Now, you can do longer than slapback durations, but it's just a single tap. That's a better example. It's a single tap delay is this one here, just called the delay effect. This also is very good. I use this all the time for like voiceover and commercial things, and I'll show you that towards the end here. I'm not going to use it for this. For this, because I'm going for kind of a warmer, more sort of classic tape delay type sound, I'm just going to turn to one of my favorite VST plugins, which actually happens to be the Real ADT, which is another Waves Abbey Road effect. This was designed to basically mimic the automatic double tracking black box that Abbey Road studio engineers built for the Beatles. Yes, so this was a concept in John Lennon's head so they wouldn't have to keep overdubbing. Very common practice at background vocals, by the way, and why I'm showing you this in these kind of raw forms. If I were to do this project for real, when I do this project for real, I will take those 4 that I recorded and overdub 4 more of the exact same registers over top of them. Not only does that, again, create that automatic natural chorusing, but it just makes things bigger and lusher. And if there are any kind of pitch variances, when you sing over top of yourself, it just naturally kind of fixes those things. This is what automatic double tracking was put in place to do, so that they wouldn't have to keep overdubbing over top of themselves. So that's what this effect simulates. And it's really, it can get really dark and dirty and grungy, or it can just sound kind of beautiful and natural. So we're going to start here with this, and let me see if I can, I think I can get all these on screen. All right, so let's go into send number 2. I'll check the chat briefly as well, since I've been narrating and talking so much. I'm also going to unmute the tape bus. All right, what have we got here? Okay. Frog with laryngitis. Nah, I don't believe that. All right. Nice. David's ripping some vinyl. I'll be doing that later. Attenuation is great already. Thank you, one alien. Okay. Is it possible to make rap music in Audition, Tiago? Absolutely. Sure. You know, whatever you want. Again, you know, if you're talking about sort of looping and stuff and MIDI, this doesn't do that. We don't do looping in MIDI. So as someone else said, you can get another app for doing that. And almost all of the other DAWs out there do that. But I'm all into live performance. So I play everything live. I sing everything live. Yes, there's sometimes some overdubs or a punch in here and there, but there's no sequencing or looping in here. So it by nature, it's done live. Okay. Nice. Okay. Sweet. That's all the questions we had. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sending the background vocals over to this effect. Now we need to kind of start somewhere. This is again where there are just beautiful, awesome presets. There's one in here that I really like to use. Where is it? Just kind of a, let's see. So that one's okay. Rock and roll heavy stereo, vocal rock stereo. Maybe we'll try that one. Warm vocal flanging. That might be good too. I don't want it too flangy. Let's start with rock vocal stereo. And we'll start to listen to what this sounds like. So I'm just going to wind back here, and I'm also going to set a range so I can just keep looping this. All right, like that. And let's just start with 1 in place, like that. And we'll start gradually increasing our send level here. You'll see the levels reflected on the tape here, and you should start to hear what's happening as it hits the real ADT. Here we go. Okay, so let's hear without the tape. All right, here it is without. Let's kick it in. Here we go. That's a little too processed, maybe. Okay, so you can hear what that's doing, right? It's making the stereo appear a little bit wider. You may have noticed too that whereas I have the, again, dry vocals for 1 and 2 panned left and right, I'm sending those same 1 and 2 panned right and left to the vari-speed tape. So it's kind of delaying from the opposite side. Again, it's not the same as singing it twice over top of itself, but it creates kind of that natural chorusing that just makes it sound a little bit bigger, a little bit wider, all right? So that sounds pretty good. I might adjust the overall level of that tape output here just a bit, but before I do that, I'll leave it, in fact, here, I'll just drop it down like a dB. I'm going to enable the reverb, and now we're going to start sending copious amounts of reverb to the buses here, all right? So let's go ahead and do that. I've got all these set at 0, so I'm going to drop these way down. And I'll just start feeding it in one by one so you can kind of get an idea of what's happening here. David, is the Waves Debreathe plugin simple to use? I don't have that one, so I'm not sure. I can tell you, as someone who owns, as you just saw, I mean, Waves, they're just fantastic. I mean, they're all so good. And usually on their site, there's usually like a little tutorial or something that shows you how to use them. Another great plugin maker, by the way, that I've just fell in love with in the last year is Softtube. I believe they're based out of Sweden, and they make some phenomenal plugins, and they always have little training vids. But for sure, David, if you don't see it on the Waves site, I guarantee if you just look here on YouTube, you'll be able to find someone who's done a tutorial on that. A Raccoon, can you make buses and sends in Premiere? Absolutely. So this is a funny thing. They're referred to as submixes, but yes, you can create buses, submix buses in Premiere Pro as well. And you can effectively do what I'm doing here with VST, VST3, and AU plugins in Premiere Pro if you so desire as well. Very commonly, again, when mixing, you know, a sound for picture, you've got dialogue submixes, sound effects submixes, ambient submixes, Foley submixes, and music submixes. So yes, you can create all of that directly in Premiere, and it's very similar inside the mixer. It doesn't look exactly the same, but in their send section, you basically sort of right-click here, and you'll get an option to create a new submix. So yeah, functions pretty similarly. All right, so let's now start sending some of this over to the Waves reverb. All right, here we go. Here, I'm going to start with this one. All right, and I want something a little bit bigger, so let's come over here, go into vocals, and I love this one, smooth vocal. Now, you've got a couple of different plate options here, each of which have their own specific color. I happen to like plate B. I think plate D is actually the tube based. I think the first three here are I think they're non-tube based. But let's take a listen to this one with plate B, and I'll kind of click through and let you hear what they sound like again. Here we go. Okay. Let's kick the effects in. Here we go. Okay. Kind of neat, right? And you can hear how it goes from kind of very just dry and bleh to very big, very wide, very open, and again, even breathier and lusher, right? Now, here's a key. When you're using a pre-fader send, this is very important to take note of. If you're sending something pre-fader, so again, all of the wet signal is contained here, and this fader controls how much of that wet output we're hearing, you want to make sure on that effect, which is typically going to be something like a reverb or a delay or whatever, that you have 100% wet signal going to that pre-fadered bus. Because if I say, you know, add 50-50, now I've got dry signal playing back through here and only 50% of the wet signal. I might as well do it post-fader then, right? I don't want that. So again, this gives you, by having it 100% wet pre-fader, that means that, again, I can play this back, and let's kill the dry signals. So that's just background vocals. All right? Going through the reverb without any direct signal whatsoever. It's very nice to narrate over too, right? This is also a good way to readjust some of those balances. Okay, pretty neat. And then you can start to, again, gradually bring in more of that dry signal. Now you might ask, why bring in the dry signal at all? Kind of just sounds like nice. You just want it kind of echoey and lush, right? Why even have the dry signal? Because the dry signal is going to give you all those little ASMR, mouthy, bright, brittle noises, and again, some of the additional breathing and just the direct sound of the voice, you know. There's some times where you don't want that, you know. But that's the benefit of having it pre-fader, is that you have that control. You can bring as much of that back in as you want. And typically, I mean, I wasn't even too aggressive with it. I'd actually even probably bring them down a bit more. In fact, here, let's go back to around 6.4, and then I'll make these, I'll do, what did I say, around minus 18-ish for that, around minus 13 for that. And now you'll see I can adjust the reverb level here as well. All right, so that's like too much, right? Okay, so you've just got lots of flexibility here. Very quickly, you could just turn this into something that's very big, very lush, very beautiful. And here, I'm just going to save this as a second variation here. Let me go ahead and open up the actual finished one, which isn't really too different from what you just heard. I'm just going to quickly here, I'll let you just hear a couple of seconds of this, all right? As it is. Okay, I've also got my IM Pusher stereo on here. And you can see I'm using a little preset called the Vocals Crystallizer, which just kind of expands the stereo image, adds a bit more of the top end there to really accentuate the breathiness, if that's what you're going for. You know, a lot of times you don't want breathiness. You know, I sang it that way, though. I sang it very on purpose. There's no pop filter on here either, so it's getting all of that. That was the desired effect for me in this case. Not always the case. So here, let's just play back a couple seconds of this. And look, what is this with this face? Here we go. Take a quick listen here.
Cease to resist. Come and say you love me. Give up your word. Wanna be with me.
All right. to kind of hear it all. And then if we just take out, let's put the backgrounds back. Now here's kind of a fun part that I thought would be fun to listen to. Oh, a couple of crappy notes there. All right, hey, it happens. All right, let's listen to this section here. All right. Pretty cool. All right. So, Norton Santos. What kind of headphones? So these are the classic standard Sony MD7506. MDR 7506. Studio standards. They're everywhere. I love these. I've been using them forever, and I always have like 3 pairs on hand. Thank you, Des. Okay, so that's mixing background vocals, friends. Again, if you want to see more about this, go to my YouTube channel. I'll type it in the chat here, youtube.com/JasonLevineVideo. I've got a whole series called Audio 101, and there's several things in there about mixing background vocals, and there's also just additional videos on my channel about mixing background voices, because it's something I do a lot of, and I do a lot of harmony, and it's my intense love for Beach Boys and Beatles that has always made me love that. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about podcast voice or voiceover in general. So hold on real quickly. I'm just going to switch my screen here, open up my file. And again, thank you. I apologize for the late start today, but I appreciate you all dropping in and sticking around. Let's see if I've got that. Yes, here we go. Audio. Okay. All right. So this is something that I actually played yesterday on the stream, and this is a voiceover that I recorded for some of the YouTube commercials for the latest updates to CC 2018. This is the original, unprocessed, untreated. You can also see single take of the voiceover. I don't even think I did any denoising or anything. No, it's just as it is. Oh, actually, no, I take that back. I may have done a little, it looks like I did some noise gating. I did. So how do I know there's noise gating? Because if you take a look, you can see how there's no background noise anyway, but when I stop talking, this little purple, this is some of the whatever lingering, there's always going to be some low frequency something in your room, nice essence of room tone. You can see that it just kind of starts to fade to black. That tells me I put a noise gate on there. All right. So let's take a quick listen to this in its original raw state and see what we got here. All right. Now it's faster than ever to set your text and images into motion. New features in After Effects include an updated Essential Graphics panel and new master properties, giving you more flexibility and greater control of your motion graphics. Okay. So again, first thing that I'll do when I look at a voiceover, whether it's for podcast or for, again, like a YouTube type commercial or anything like that, is use this panel here. I've shown this 100 million times on stream, amplitude statistics. Why do I show this? Because this literally tells you everything you need to know about your audio, whether it's, again, coming from a studio recording or from a lav or from a nice condenser mic or from a Zoom box or something, whatever it is. It's just going to tell you everything you need to know in advance before you begin playing around with it. So right away, first and foremost, you'll see the peak amplitude, all right? So now this, before I deliver things, I always ask, what do you want this at? And the team at Adobe, they typically like unprocessed stuff, voiceover at -3. Again, it's unprocessed, so there's plenty of headroom here to still work with, and the dynamics can be controlled. So it was normalized to -3. True peak, of course, is relative to the measurement as it relates to loudness units, which is this figure down here. We'll get to that in a second. main focus here, of course, are things like clipped samples, which, because my peak is only -3, obviously there's no digitally clipped samples here. This is very, very valuable. It's not uncommon. I have people send me files all the time. They're like, hey, I don't know, I'm getting this weird clipping thing. Yeah, because you had clipped samples. Had they just run this, they would have known that. And then it's easy to fix. Not always. Sometimes it can't fix everything, but I've shown that in other live streams as well. So this is important to know, clipped samples. Specifically also, if you're finalized your audio and you're kind of just referencing what you're sending to the client, don't send the client something that has clipped samples, right? Especially if you're sending them MP3s, which I hope you're not, but sometimes you do. I've done it. They want MP3s, you give them MP3. It's not uncommon to take something that's really loud, you turn it into an MP3, and then you end up with clipped samples in the decode. So again, be aware in advance. Then you've got your average RMS values here. This kind of relates to the old school loudness metering, monitoring via dB full scale, dBFS. But of course, today in podcasts, in broadcast audio, we're not really measuring dBFS. We're more concerned about loudness units, LUFS, loudness units relative to full scale. And that's what this figure is down here. Now, what's essential about this, in its current state, without me even touching this voiceover, the measurement, the average loudness here is -23.5 LUFS. That already actually conforms to both the EBU and ITU broadcast standard. So if this were going out to, say, broadcast TV or even like a Netflix show or something, I wouldn't actually have to do anything to this to make it broadcast safe, to make it broadcast compliant. It actually already falls within the broadcast loudness levels for compliance, both here in Europe and in the US and Canada. Now, again, your broadcaster, whomever, may say, okay, but we don't want it at -3. We want the peaks at -6, in which case, if I didn't want to affect the dynamics, I would normalize down to -6. However, that's going to change the loudness here. So something else that I could do would be to implement something like a hard limiter or a digital ceiling limiter. And if you take a look here, so you can see, I'm just kind of getting all nerdy on you, but I'm trying to show you. Here's where -6 is right here. So you can see there's just like momentary transient peaks that exceed -6. So what in fact I would do, and again, this hasn't been treated yet, is I would compress these in advance just to even out those dynamic peaks before it's sent. I would never just broadcast a raw voiceover live. I'm giving you all this additional information just to show you that once if you do a lot of voiceover work, your recordings should look a lot like this. And you can see that once generally your first word, today, the new version of, whatever it is usually momentarily a little bit louder. That first attack is usually a little bit louder. But it's all the program material here that should be kind of consistent. If you've got stuff that's all over the place, you need to practice more. Voiceover delivery, successful voiceover delivery should be really even, right? Like this piece right here. Improved Essential Graphics panel with additional support for 2D position, rotation, and scale. So it's not uncommon that rotation, that little T, that burst of air, is going to be just a couple of dB louder than the previous consonant. That's normal. But what you're trying to achieve, of course, is consistency. You're trying to achieve that consistency before processing. That's the key, all right? So again, amplitude statistics tells you everything you need to know, including things like the measured bit depth here. If you're recording with a standard modern audio input device, that's generally going to be 24-bit. Because I applied one of our noise gates and affected this, that's why, and resaved it, that's why you're seeing it measured at 32. Captured at 24-bit, all right? And then it'll show you like the dynamic range used. So again, in 24-bit, you have approximately 140 dB of dynamic range. This falls in line with that. We're good to go. There's no noise. Again, I would often look at the spectral display and go, okay, do I see any low frequency rumble or weirdness? No, right? And again, this is showing us frequency over time. Frequency along our vertical axis, time along the X, color is amplitude. The brighter the color, the louder the amplitude. You can see there's some stuff down here in the sub 50 hertz range, but nothing that's getting in the way, nothing that's resonating. And additionally, if you look over here at our frequency analysis, you can see that I've got my bass roll off Actually, I may have implemented a bass roll-off on the preamp that I was using for this, which was a 60 hertz roll-off. So you can actually see that at 60 right here, it just tapers off, right? Simple, smooth. So there's no bass worry. These are actually my, low-end fundamentals, right? So the low-end fundamental of my voice is right around, in this case, right around 62, right? See it right here, 62 hertz. So I resonate at 62. That's usually, and it can go even lower, I'm sure, but I wasn't trying to be 70s broadcaster. I was trying to be a little bit more modern than that. Very easy for me to slip into 70s broadcaster. Hey, Bake Like a Pro, thank you very much. Christina, that's a fantastic question. Do you have to record at a soundproof studio? No, you do not. And I would venture to say that most voiceover artists that I know and work with usually record in a closet or, a room, and it's generally not soundproofed. It might be sound treated. Now, what is the difference? Soundproofing implies that there's no echo, no reflection, and it's, the only way that you can prevent sound from coming in or going out is mass. So the inside of the walls would be treated. You've got the sonic foam up on you. Now, this whole room is treated here. My studio here is not soundproofed, it is sound treated, which is why you don't hear any echoes or reflections, and why when I do those, that voiceover was recorded right here, sitting right here, exactly like this, in this position, no pop filter, just doing it, right? Now, it is sound treated, and by the way, the little background noise that you hear right now, that's this hard drive that I have right here, which is archiving. That, of course, I turn off when I do my voiceovers or my vocals. That's the only thing generating any conceivable noise in here. So the short answer is you want to be in if possible, a treated space. If you're in an office, right, and offices are typically reflective and echoey, that's not ideal. Now, can you remove noise, like hard drive noise? Absolutely. That's actually pretty easy to remove. Can you remove HVAC, air conditioning noise? Absolutely. Also easy to remove and see and visually identify. Echoiness, echo and bright reflections, not so easy to treat. And that's why, you go to a lot of YouTube videos and, they're otherwise shot beautifully, but you can tell it's like someone's living room, right? Because it's just sort of a little echoey. They're probably a bit further away than they should be from the mic, so that distance creates additional space. It's very, very difficult to eliminate that. I'm someone who has said for years, and I've yet to find, if someone can build the plugin that truly de-reverbs a room, they're out there. They don't do it. I mean, they do something, but it's not, it's always someone, classic example is I used to work with a lot of wedding videographers, and not uncommonly they'd record like the ceremony in the church or wherever, and sometimes there'd be a lav mic just on the who's ever doing the wedding, priest, rabbi, whatever it is, and then they're also capturing sound from way up in the stands or something, 100 feet away, 50 feet away. And they'd say, okay, well, we have some of their direct sound that's bleeding into the pastor's lavalier mic, but all their sound is just, it's echoey. And can we remove that echo? And really the answer is no. What you can do is you can use equalization to accentuate some of the fundamental frequencies of their speaking voices to make it a little more intelligible, a little more understandable. But what you can't do is remove that distance from the microphone capsule. It's just virtually impossible. Again, there are some plugins that actually do a fairly decent job of removing sort of spatial echo, but it's that distance that's the bigger problem. So you might remove the echoiness, but you're still going to sound like you're far away. So then someone says, okay, well then amplify it or normalize it. Yes, so now it's louder, but it still sounds like it was recorded 50 feet away. It's just not echoey, and it's no more closer to you, it's just louder. All right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Tristan. Yeah, no, I mean, again, it's just how you treat. And by the way, sound treating, you can't see with the camera here, but I used to do studio design, so it's all very symmetrical in here, and it's really, it's a it's a process. It's an art. It's a study. You kind of need to know how reflections work based on the depth of your room, based on the shape. This is actually a fairly wide, but also kind of deep rectangle. So kind of typical for a mixed studio. My previous office was a square, high-ceilinged room. It was treated, and I did all my Twitch streams and things from there, but it was a little more challenging because, one, the ceiling was very high, and two, it's square, which is kind of the worst mixing option, right? Someone right now is in a square room going, oh, did he just call my room bad? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Sound doesn't like to exist in a square room. It's too boxy, and that's how things get mixed improperly. Not to say that you can't mix something amazing in there. You can. But, you know, it's like saying to a painter, well, here's the cool news. You got this amazing space. Bad news is no natural light, and you only have soft white incandescent bulbs. Right? That's not ideal. It's same for sound. You don't want a square, high-ceilinged, echoey room. So, of course, I had to do all different types of treatments to not only treat the echoes, but also to roll off certain bass frequencies, but also keep some of them, because otherwise you'd get that kind of weird, and I'd also get this weird, like, phantom center. Anyway, we're going off topic here. Tristan, what does normalize really do? Excellent question, friend. Normalize... and I will give you the explanation. I've heard people recently say this on various YouTube videos, and I don't know why people just tend to not say this correctly. So first and foremost, normalize does not affect dynamics whatsoever. Normalize takes your audio, and I'm going to show you this in real time right here. So it takes like this piece right here. In fact, here, let's copy this to a new file so there's nothing in the way. Takes this audio, and I scan it. And you can see that the peak amplitude of this file is minus 6.5 dB full scale, okay? Normalize says, get to the loudest peak of my file, and based on that loudest peak, adjust the levels of everything evenly to a specific value. So if I say normalize to -3 and click apply, it looks at that loudest peak, wherever that is. And by the way, this little button right here, if you click on that, did you notice my cursor moved? You could visually see where it was anyway, but that's what this thing does. That's what these things do. They take you to that section. So the loudest peak is right here. It says, okay, based on that loudest peak, raise everything to -3. But the loudest peak is -3. So not all peaks go to -3, just the loudest peak. And whatever that differential was, so it was 3.5 dB, right, is how much that actually increased the volume. Everything moved up by 3.5 decibels. If we rescan, you'll see now the peak amplitude is -3. So we just moved everything up globally by 3.5. Now, again, so normalize looks at the loudest peak and then says, okay, remember, we're talking digital here. So digitally, we're working in a negative logarithmic scale. 0 is as loud as you can get. Minus, in this case, 140 is as quiet as we can get. You can only go up to 0. So normalize always says, okay, your peak is -3. If you normalize to 0, you've only got 3 decibels of headroom. You can't go any higher than that, right? So it just looks at the loudest peak and then says, based on that, here's how much headroom you have, and then you can raise it to that amount. Compared to, say, compression or limiting, where we're actually squeezing down peaks or raising quiet sections and affecting the dynamic range, normalize doesn't do that at all. It looks at the loudest peak, it analyzes and figures out how much headroom you have based on that peak, based on how close it is to 0, and then you can boost or cut accordingly. Does that make sense? Let's see, Anne's saying, normalize doesn't really help clipping though, right? My mic gains were too high in a recording recently and I didn't know it. Yes, that is absolutely true. So, because here's the thing, Audition, you will often, well, yes, no, Anne. So here's something really interesting, and I'll do a separate stream. I've done this before, and again, this is in the Audio 101s under sound restoration. So we have a declipper, which will fix digitally clipped inputted signals. You can actually have an audio file where the audio, the peaks go above 0. Now, because Audition works in 32-bit float, those extra 8 bits above 24 actually are there to allow you to reprocess your audio to bring it down within range. So if you're, say, within about 10 to 12 dB above 0 for a transient peak, I don't mean like bzzz, if you got something like loud and long, this is not going to help you there. But if you've got like a piece of dialogue where just they say, and you know, I was eating pizza the other day, and that pizza causes it to go like 5, 6, 7 dB above 0. You can restore that with normalize, actually. You will be able to restore that just by normalizing below 0 dB, theoretically. Now, if that doesn't work, what you can also do is you can go into the diagnostics panel, which I'm going to drag up here, and you can go into the declipper, all right? And you can either choose restore normal or restore lightly clipped. I often choose this preset because this will perform a little bit of an attenuation, meaning it's going to drop all of the audio down a little bit, but it's also going to fix those momentary clipped transients. And so you scan your file. There's no clipped samples here, so it's not going to do anything. You then repair it. This, I've shown many times, this can work real magic on just what you're describing. And it is, in fact, performing a bit of a normalize when it attenuates. So normalize can fix clipped signals. The thing is, though, in the way you're describing it, too, though, you don't necessarily want to do that, right? Because if you've got a peak that's 12 decibels above everything else, if you normalize to 0, so you bring it down 12, well, now everything's brought down 12 dB. Now everything is super quiet. So that doesn't kind of help your cause. What you really want to do is treat just the peak, in which case, and again, it's not present here, but what you'll often do, because you can get down to individual samples and pieces of the waveform here, you know, you could take something like, if this is your peaked section, and just drop the amplitude of that. Why is this not moving right now? Why is this not doing anything? Is this broken? That's very strange. Why is that not working? Oh, there we go. Did you just see that? It wasn't doing anything. I've never seen that before. Okay, so this is what you would want to do. You know, if it's that singular peak, I often will come in and just readjust those little individual peaks first, and then I'll run amplitude statistics, and if it tells me, you know, you still have another one. This is, again, this will help you find where that peak is, and you can zero right in on it, there, right, and zoom in real super tight, and then, you know, treat this accordingly, right, and drop the amplitude accordingly. Why is this not moving? What is going on here? That's a bug. Oh, why am I always finding these things live? It's moving right there. It doesn't like that zoom level. Interesting, interesting. Okay. Well, that's fine. Zoom out a little. All right. So I hope that answers your question, Ann. Nice, nice. Okay, yep, nod. Is there a way to make all the sound level, like match it across the waveform? Yes. So now this kind of leads into where I was going. Now there's a lot of different ways to do this. It's 2:40, so thanks everyone for sticking around. If we're talking about compression and limiting, and I don't have enough time to go into all of that, that's what you're using compression for. So let me just show you real quickly. If we went into something like our tube modeled compressor, all right. And I don't know how badly I just screwed. In fact, here, let me go back to the original file, not this piece of the file that we're working on here. Where is it? Where is it? What is this voiceover I'm working on? What am I doing? Here it is. If I come in here, let's rescan. All right, we're at -3. Come up to amplitude compression, tube model compressor. All right. So here is where, if I just wanted to kind of even everything out dynamically without amplifying anything, I just want to even everything out, I'm going to use just standard compression. Now, typical compression ratio for a voiceover, for a commercial, anywhere from 2:1 to 8:1. 8:1 is pretty aggressive. 2:1 might not be quite enough. Based on the peaks that I have here, I'm going to go with about a 4:1 ratio. Now, again, I don't want to make this a whole compression limiting thing. I'm going to show you another automatic method in a second. I highly recommend going to my Audio 101 Lesson 8 on audio compression. It will teach you everything you need to know about doing this. It's an hour, but you will walk away wiser, and you'll feel confident in using compression. By the way, you can also do this inside Essential Sound with a single slider, just to point that out too, using the clarity slider. But if we want to do it old school manually, we're going to set our attack time. Now this is a fairly fast voiceover, so I'm going to keep the attack, normally I go around 9 milliseconds. I'll try it at 3, that should be okay. Release time of 100 milliseconds, that's a 1/10 of a second release. I'm going to speed that up a little bit to around 79. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust that threshold. Now, based on the ratio, I have to exceed at least 4 decibels above the threshold before this compression begins. I have to exceed the threshold by 4 dB before that compression will kick in. All right, so that's what that means. So for every 4 dB above the threshold, it's 1 dB at the output. For every 8 dB above the threshold, 4 to 1, it'll be 2 dB at the output. All right, so let me go ahead and I'll play this, and I'll start adjusting the threshold slider here. In fact, we can just take it back to the beginning. Now it's faster than ever to set your text and images into motion. New features in After Effects include an updated Essential Graphics panel and new master properties, giving you more flexibility and greater control of your motion graphics. And you can make project-wide changes in a single click. So you can see, oh good, it left it there for just a second. So we have to hit at least 4 dB of gain reduction here to know that we're actually applying this compressor properly. And again, if I wanted to go a bit more aggressive, I could drop this down, let's say to around -25. All right, if I go ahead and apply this now, take a look. So you can actually see, now that was without adjusting amplitude. All right, so hold on, let me go back to this for a quick second, because I don't want to drop the amplitude. We want to use this, we want to maintain the same amplitude here. So one of the keys of using compression, again, this is why we could spend so much time on this, is when you apply the compressor, you have to use that output gain, which is also referred to as makeup gain, so that when you turn the compressor on or off, the volume should appear about the same, okay? That means that you're setting it properly, okay? So let's go ahead and play this back again. I'll turn it on, and then I'll adjust that output gain, and then I'll start turning it on or off, and you should hear that the program material doesn't really change in volume. You can't hear that those peaks are out of range anymore. Take a listen, you'll see what I mean. Here we go. Now it's faster than ever to set your text and images into motion. New features in After Effects include an updated Essential Graphics panel and new master properties, giving you more flexibility and greater control of your motion graphics. And you can make project-wide changes in a single click. Okay, sounds pretty good. So here we go on. Premiere Pro also has an improved Essential Graphics panel with additional support for 2D position, rotation, and scale for customizing motion graphics templates from After Effects. Cool. Okay, and I'm actually going to make that attack 1 millisecond here because I'm hitting those transients super fast. Let's go ahead and click Apply. And there you go. All right. So you can see now everything is even, but the body is the same. It doesn't sound quieter. We just brought down all those peaks and kind of evened everything out via compression. And now if I go to scan this, what you're going to see is now we've got like 11.5 decibels of headroom. So those peaks, this is what I was talking about with Ant's question before. Those peaks were just getting in the way. They were robbing us of amplitude that we could otherwise leverage. Now, I'm not going to bring this up 11 dB, but if we just bring it up, let's say around 4 or 5, it's going to be pretty loud if you're in headphones, but it's going to be very even, as you can see. Take a listen. Now it's faster than ever to set your text and images into motion. New features in After Effects include an updated Essential Graphics panel and new master properties, giving you more flexibility and greater control of your motion graphics. Okay, so compression can be used to do just that. Again, I highly recommend checking out Audio 101 Lesson 8. Now, if we want to do this even faster, even easier, another way that you can with one file or multiple files, based on Tristan's question a moment ago, was to use match loudness. So I'm going to bring match loudness in here, all right? And the way that this works is you actually take the files that you want. So I'm going to take that copied voiceover, and then let's take this one as well. And here, you know what? I'll just, oh, actually, I don't think I have any more. I don't have any more locally. All right, that's fine. And it analyzes what everything is. And you can see that it says, okay, this one is at -24. This is at -22. Okay. Well, let's say that I wanted to go to kind of the podcast standard of -16. Okay. You can set a target loudness based on the broadcast standard to -16 LUFS. And if I go ahead and run that, all right, it does just that. And what you actually see here is that not only did it adjust the loudness, but, and does it actually show that down here? Yeah, and it even says use true peak limiting. So if based on that standard, you were going to be exceeding a true peak level based on this standard here, a max true peak of -1, it applies a hard limiter basically. So you can see it never goes above -1 dBTP. Okay, that's a different figure than -1 dBFS. So this is one way to do it, especially if you've got multiple files. And if you take it, this is going to be super loud, but let's take a quick listen. Premiere Pro also has an improved Essential Graphics panel with additional support for 2D position, rotation, and scale for customizing motion graphics templates from After Effects. I mean, it's present, it's clean. Again, we just said make it -16, which is the podcast standard. Boom, done. Ready to upload to iTunes. All right. That's without processing. We didn't EQ, we didn't affect, we didn't compress, we didn't do anything. All that was done here. Now, the other cool thing about this, and I'll share this last bit with you, if you have, let's say, a voiceover or a file that you want to match the loudness of, all right, we have this option here. So let's say that I had my favorite podcast downloaded, and I'm like, oh, yeah, reference that one. Well, I can dial that in. I don't have to give it any levels. I'll tell it to use limiting, so again, it doesn't go above 0 dB, and then I run that process and it will match the program loudness of my voiceover or podcast audio based on that existing file example that we give there. So this, I don't use it too often. I have used it. It's awesome. I mean, it does what it's supposed to do, and it's not magic, to be honest. It's just amplitude analysis, right? So really, all it's doing is, and that's what you're seeing here, right? All of the data that you see here is what I see in amplitude statistics here. So it analyzes all of this and it says, okay, cool. Based on what it is now, here's what I have to do to amplify or attenuate to make these files the same program loudness or peak level or RMS loudness based on my reference, which again could have been your favorite podcast or you know, a spoken word documentary or book on tape, you know, something like that. Someone recently was doing. I had a friend who was doing an oral history of their lives that they've published via Amazon, and they wanted to do the audio companion. And I said, oh, that's cool. And they said, oh, and I love this one, David Bowie. I can't remember. David Bowie was narrating something. And they're like, I want this to kind of sound the same. And I said, okay, well, EQ we'll have to do manually, but even though there are match EQ plugins, by the way. But as far as loudness goes, oh yeah, that's a single click. And sure enough, we didn't even wind up having to EQ because once he ran this process and referenced this David Bowie voiceover, he recorded on a really nice mic, so that the recording was very good. It just worked. Like it sounded the same loudness, kind of sounded very similar, and he loved it. He was like, okay, good, published. And that was that. All right. Sweet. Nice. I'm on. Share, Tristan, Ant. Cool, cool, cool. All right. Sweet. Christina. All right, nice. Well, hey, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed today's live stream, running very late. Sorry again for the delays. You'll, of course, be able to watch the replays right here on the Adobe Creative Cloud YouTube channel. And until next time, I'll be back Monday on the Premiere Pro Facebook page, probably around 1 p.m. Pacific time, talking about, I'm sure, some video workflows. Lots of things to cover over the next couple of weeks. We're doing, you know, we've got a lot of anniversaries going on. It's premieres. It was Premiere's anniversary. Last year we got After Effects anniversary. It's Audition's 25th anniversary. So I'm going to be covering a lot of little hidden gems in Premiere Pro over the next couple of weeks. All these little small things that people often forget, but they're just great time savers. So stick around for that next week. Have a great weekend wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.